Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the week 2 edition of my top starts and sits. You guys should know the drill by now. I'm going to be giving you guys my top 2 starts and sits at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. Before I dive into today's video, I also would like to do my little reminder that the starts and sits I do, you can apply this to your daily fantasy lineups. And I also do apply it to when I bet overs and unders on players as well. With that being said, go ahead and get this video started. At the quarterback spot, my top star of the week, I'm going Drake May against the Dolphins. I know Drake May didn't have the performance that some fantasy managers would have liked out of him in week 1, but he's going against this pretty bad Dolphins defense on Sunday. We saw what Daniel Jones did against the Dolphins defense this past weekend, where he threw for 272 passing yards. He also had 26 rushing yards and 3 total touchdowns. In that game, the Dolphins lost one of their starting cornerbacks in that game. So I'm looking for the Patriots offense to take advantage of that weak secondary in Miami. So guys like Stephon Diggs, Pop Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, they should be able to win their matchups. And I'll be looking for Drake May to get around at least 220 passing yards, ideally 220 rushing yards, and at least a pair of touchdowns for you on Sunday. My other top start is I'm looking for a bounce back game out of this Lions offense. I like Jared Goff against the Bears this weekend. Chicago, in that matchup against the Minnesota Vikings this past Monday night, they were missing their top 2 cornerbacks. We don't know if those guys will be back in the lineup this week. If they are out, they are missing their top 2 cornerbacks. That should bode well for Jared Goff. And then when you look at the history of what Jared Goff has done against Chicago since he's joined the Lions, he has 6 career games against the Bears with the Lions. And he has at least 6 career games where he's thrown at least 220 passing yards against the Bears since he's joined the Lions. And in those 6 career games, I don't know if they were the same. There might have been one of the games where he threw below the 220 yards. But he does also have the 6 career games against Chicago with the Lions where he's thrown at least 2 touchdowns. So I'm looking for a bounce back performance, and Jared Goff wouldn't be a bad streaming option, especially maybe if you're going to be missing Brock Purdy this weekend, and people in your leagues dropped Goff because of how that offense looked last week. My other sits, I am going to go with Bo Nix against the Colts. This is strictly just based off 2 things: how Bo Nix looked throwing the ball. The passing attack looked very clunky to me from Denver in week 1. So it does seem like they're kind of working through things at this point of the season. And then Nix also threw that 1 interception. He was just off on his targets in that game. So before I start playing Bo Nix again in my lineups, I just want him to re-earn his trust before I start playing him. And another factor, too, is the Colts defense looked awesome last week. They were playing with high energy. They got multiple sacks in that game. They forced 3 different turnovers. So this is strictly just, I don't like how the Denver offense looked with the Denver, at least passing attack, looked with Bo Nix last week. And I thought the Colts defense looked really good last weekend. So I would just want to be patient with Nix before I start playing him again. Then I also am going to suggest sitting Matthew Stafford against the Titans. Bo Nix did play that Titans defense. Am I saying that maybe the Titans defense is a lot better than what I expected? No. I do think eventually you're going to be able to take advantage of that Titans secondary with the matchups. But the biggest reason why I don't want to play Matthew Stafford this week is the Los Angeles Rams. It sounds like both of their starting guards are probably going to be missing this game. They're both listed. I think Sean McVay said they're week to week. So if he's missing both of his guards, they're going to be going against an interior defensive line that features one of the best defensive tackles in the game in Jeffrey Simmons, and then the second-year player T'Vondre Sweat. So those guys should be able to win their matchups against those backup guards for Los Angeles. So what I'm thinking is the Los Angeles Rams are probably going to be going with a quick passing attack, getting the ball out of Matthew Stafford's hands, little short to intermediate routes. I don't know if they're going to be getting much explosive plays this weekend through the air. And then obviously we do understand that Matthew Stafford entered the season with that back injury. If Jeffrey Simmons or T'Vondre Sweat, either of them fall on him, but especially if T'Vondre Sweat were to fall on Matthew Stafford in this game, there's that risk of re-injuring his back. So I'd be looking for a different option than Matthew Stafford this week. moving into my top starts and sits at the running back spot, guy I definitely was I definitely did miss last week. I am not afraid to admit when I do miss on some of my sits, but I would definitely love his matchup though this week. Breece Hall against the Bills. The Bills' rushing defense looked completely awful. What, Derrick Henry had almost 200 yards rushing against them last week. I thought Breece Hall looked like he has his juice back. He looked like he was how he played prior to that injury he had a couple years ago. And then you look at his career games against Buffalo. He has 4 career games against the Bills. In 2 of those games, he's ran for at least 100 yards, and in 2 of those games, he's caught over 50 receiving yards. So I definitely like having Hall back in my lineups this weekend. My other top start I like is James Conner against the Panthers. Now, if you're maybe looking for a cheaper option in your daily lineups, I would maybe consider Trey Benson, who looks like he's going to have a healthy dose of touches this season. But yeah, this is basically what the Jaguars rushing attack did against them last week. Travis Etienne just this past Sunday ran for 143 yards against the Carolina Panthers defense. He averaged 8.9 yards per carry. So the reason why I like Conner this week is I'm going to be chasing the ceiling play. I'm going to be looking for him to get at least close to 100 yards and a touchdown or two. Ideally, at least 80 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns this weekend for Conner. I think that would be like an ultimate ceiling play you can get out of him, especially when you factor in how much more touches Benson is getting this season. Now, my sit. I know I'm probably going to have the pitchforks come out for me to suggest sitting the fantasy darling in old Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt or Bill Krosky Merritt. I know most people are calling him Bill. But against the Packers on this Thursday night matchup, I thought the Green Bay rushing defense looked a lot better than expected. I think actually Micah Parsons helped that out because of the attention he's going to draw. It's going to allow the other guys in the interior of the line and also their other DNs like Rashawn Gary to be making plays on that defensive front for the Green Bay Packers. I thought their linebacker, I think it's Quay Walker, he was flying all over the field. And then when you look at that, you could argue still that the Lions have one of the, if not the best pair of running backs in the NFL with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and they held both of them to 41 rushing yards combined. And then one of the other reasons why I don't like Krosky Merritt in this matchup this week, you also got to keep in mind he only touched the ball 10 times. Austin Eckler touched the ball more than him in that matchup. So if he doesn't get you a touchdown, he still had the 80 yards against that Giants defense. But again, like I said, I think this Packers defense is playing pretty good. So if he doesn't turn his 10 touches into a lot of yards, you're going to have to bet on him getting a touchdown. And then I know it's just week 1, but he's still a rookie running back. This is a quick turnaround to that Thursday night matchup. How is his body feeling? Are they going to maybe give him only those maybe 10 to 12 touches? So that's my biggest concern with having him in my lineups. I don't want to chase last week's points from him on Thursday night. And then another guy I don't like this weekend is Isaiah Pacheco against the Eagles. The Eagles, obviously, they let Javonte Williams have a good fantasy night that first return when the NFL returned last Thursday. But keep in mind, Jalen Carter, their best defensive lineman, spit on Dak Prescott, and he didn't play that whole game. That's a big impact on their rush defense. Jalen Carter is going to be playing in this game, so that is why I would definitely don't love Pacheco this week. And then when you look at his touches, he only touched the ball 7 times against the Chargers. So just factor in that Carter's back in the lineup and he's just coming off a game where he only got 7 touches is why I would not want to play Pacheco, because I do think the Chiefs offense can attack this secondary of Philadelphia on Sunday to try to get to revenge their Super Bowl loss. Moving into my top starts and sits at the wide receiver spot. My top start of the week, I am chasing the revenge game of DK Metcalf against the Seahawks. That's strictly the reason. He's gonna there. That they're gonna feed him the ball against their former team. I would bet that he's gonna get at least 10 plus targets in this game, and that Rodgers is gonna want to find a way to get Metcalf in the end zone. So I'm looking for Metcalf to have anywhere between 7 to 10 catches in this game, close to 100 yards receiving, and at least a touchdown on Sunday. And my other start I like is if I like Jared Goff. Obviously, I don't need to tell you guys to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I do love his counterpart this weekend, Jameson Williams, against the Bears. Basically, this is strictly based off of like I said, Goff's past success against Detroit. Again, just to reiterate it as well, the Bears might be down their top two cornerbacks again this weekend. And then when you look at what Jameson Williams did in his last game against Chicago last year, he had 7 catches for 143 yards and a touchdown. So I would love for him to repeat that as well. And then my sit. I get it if you guys play him, right? Tyreek Hill against the Patriots. If you do play Hill, just temper your expectations because Hill has not been performing great as of late in his recent games. The reason why is if you guys did not hear that stat, Tyreek Hill has not had a catch over 30 yards in over a year at this point. When you look at the past 5 games for Hill, he has finished under 50 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games. And then there's this off-field issue where he's having the lawsuit from one of his former wives. I don't think he's gonna get suspended by Sunday, but does that impact his performance and his play on the field? And for those reasons, I'd be looking to avoid Hill. I understand why you might play him if you need to, but I would just temper your expectations. My other sit, I am going to go with that stud rookie in Jacksonville, Travis Hunter against the Cardinals. When you look at the Cardinals, they have a very revamped secondary, especially with the addition of that Michigan cornerback and Will Johnson, who looked very good this past weekend. The Cardinals held the top 2 wide receivers for the Saints under 55 receiving yards on Sunday. When you look at what Hunter did in his first game, he had 6 catches, but he only managed 33 yards. So basically, for him to be in my lineups, I just want to see more of him getting closer to a ceiling production before I want to trust him in a week in, week out lineup play where you can trust him as a starter. He might have to be a matchup based play at this point. And then something came out today which makes me be even very more hesitant about having Hunter in my lineups is Cohen, the head coach for the Jaguars, said that Hunter's actually going to be playing more defensive snaps this weekend. Now, I didn't look at the full quote. All I saw is that he's taking more defensive snaps. I don't know if that means he's going to play the same amount of offensive snaps, just to start playing more defense. I don't know if that means more defense and less offense. But with that being said, if he's going to be playing more defensive snaps, that's going to probably take away his offensive snaps. Maybe it takes away his performance, especially if he starts getting exhausted playing on defense. So I would just kind of go back to having Hunter on my bench and wait till he has more of a consistent role in that offense before I start playing him again. And then moving into the tight end top starts and sits, I'm going to go with David Njoku against the Ravens. A couple reasons why. I can just see a very heavy passing attack for Cleveland again. Now, was that the right approach in a close game last weekend against the Bengals? No, that's not what the Browns offense should be doing. But I just think the Baltimore offense is going to end up at some point in this game take the Ravens on a 2-score lead, which will push the Browns to have to pass the ball in this matchup. I thought Baltimore struggled in coverage against the tight ends against the Bills. Dalton Kincaid had a great game. I mean, he was the tight end 1 last week. Dawson Knox had a couple catches in that game. There was an opportunity where he could have got a touchdown, but Josh Allen ended up actually running the ball in on that play. And then also too, remember that I think their third string tight end caught that big catch that got them right down to the end zone before they were able to go down by 2 points. And then when you look at the history, recent history for Njoku has at least 5 catches and at least 45 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games against the Ravens. And then I like Tyler Warren going against the Broncos this weekend, just basically what he looked like this past Sunday. Looks like he's going to have a vital role in this passing attack. On the opening drive for the Colts, he had 3 targets and he turned that into 42 yards on the first drive of the game. They ran plays to get the ball in his hands. I forget who mentioned it. I want to say maybe it was Daniel Jeremiah on the Move the Sticks podcast, talked about how even if they designed the pass play to go to somebody else, They designed the route where Warren was going to be always in Daniel Jones' vision, where he was looking on the field. So maybe if the initial read wasn't open, if Warren's open, he can just get him the ball. So I think Warren, I think we have to see some consistency, right? This is just after week one. But Warren's I think, gonna work into himself into a status where I don't have to tell you guys to start him. He's gonna be an obvious start, like a Brock Bowers, where I don't have to tell you guys to start him or sit him any given week. And then my other sits, Mark Andrews against the Browns. I think Mark Andrews, guys, and I mean, he could prove me wrong this weekend, but it does seem like his time has officially ended. And maybe it did end last year for him to be a fantasy relevant tight end. I'm not sure if Isaiah Likely is going to be back this week, but that's a name to keep in mind off the waivers if you are struggling at the tight end position. But the reason why I don't like Mark Andrews is he only had the one catch. You just can't trust that in your lineups if a guy's going to only get one target. And then, as I mentioned, why I like Njoku is I do think the Ravens are going to take a 2-score lead at some point in this game. So I could see the Baltimore Ravens not really passing a lot in the second half if they end up taking a 14-21 point lead by the third or fourth quarter in this game. And then my other sit, he was a sit for me last week, and I'm going to go ahead and continue it until this week. But the rookie tight end for the Bears, Colston Loveland against the Lions. As I mentioned last week, we just don't know what his role was going to be. They still got DJ Moore. They got Rome Odunze. Olamide Zaccheaus seems like he's going to have a role in this offense. And a guy I mentioned last week too is Cole Kmet is still going to have a role in this offense. And speaking of that, Cole Kmet out-targeted Colston Loveland. Kmet had 4 targets in that game, and Loveland only had 2 targets. So before I start playing Loveland, I just wanted to see him get at least 5 targets in like 2 or 3 straight games, and then that's when I think you could trust him back in your lineups. So yeah, those are my top starts and sits for week 2 of this NFL season. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all my social media platforms. I'm on X, that's where I'm most active, where you can get me to respond most likely. And then I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. You guys will get me back next Tuesday when I do my top waiver wires and streamable defenses. I am kind of thinking about maybe trying to do a third video of the week, but I might do that more on NFL basis. But that might be something I do down the line, maybe here in a couple weeks. I'm trying to think of maybe doing something extra on my video content. So maybe stay tuned to that. But that's why you want to subscribe so you know when it's posted. I'll talk to you guys next week. Peace out.